Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the open meeting for Thursday, June 22nd, 2023, and ask the Commission Secretary for information on today's agenda.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the minutes of the open meeting of Thursday, June 8th, 2023, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes of June 8th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the agenda, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the notices associated with agenda items 2 through 15.
Move we approve the notices of investigation associated with agenda items 2 through 14.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Move we approve the notice of proceeding associated with agenda item 15.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that moves us to agenda item 16, which is docket 5-AF-108. This is a deferral request filed by Wisconsin Electric Power Company, Wisconsin Power and Light, and Wisconsin Public Service. They are seeking permission to defer foregone revenue related to the elimination of reactive power compensation. Now, this concerns a filing that was made by MISO at FERC related to the transmission owner's ability to eliminate charges under a certain schedule. FERC issued their final order on January 27th of 2023, and that order was retroactive. And so because of that FERC order, the applicants are requesting a total deferral of $5.4 million for WEPCO, $4.3 million for Wisconsin Power and Light, and $7.3 million for Wisconsin Public Service. And in the event that that particular FERC order is reversed prior to any of those applicants' next rate proceedings, the applicants would reverse this accounting entry. So the decision at FERC directly impacts these utilities. My reading of our statement of position 9401, which sets forth the criteria for evaluating the reasonableness of a deferral request, in my opinion, those factors have been met. I know that we just talked about this and timing, and we set 45 days after the beginning for deferral requests related to amounts that are incurred, say in December. We set 45 days as our time limit. This is, in my mind, a unique circumstance. The order came out in January, and so that already ate up a few of those days in 2023. And the applicants did file their request within 45 days of receiving notification. And I think we all can understand that it takes some time to go through orders that come from regulatory agencies, and so I think that in this particular case, I am comfortable authorizing the applicants to defer the full amount that they've requested. And I am also comfortable authorizing them to go back to December 1st, 2022. This is a reaction to an order coming from a federal agency. And I think that the applicants took steps within a reasonable amount of time. And certainly, in my opinion, again, I believe that the request meets the requirements for a deferral. So I'm at alternative 1 for both of our decisions. Commissioner Huebner?
Yeah, I'm in the same spot with you. I think I'll just add to that there were 2 impacts of this change. One is actually going to be a benefit to customers that will automatically flow through an existing escrow account. And so this is the cost side of it. The numbers don't exactly match depending on the utility at hand, but there are 2 sides, and customers will see the benefit of that other side. I'm in the same spot. Exceptional and unusual. I mean, what do you do when a FERC order comes out in January and retroactively applies back to the year before? It's a strange situation, but I landed at alternative 1.
Agreed. Okay. Commissioner Strand?
So I'm comfortable with authorizing a deferral. We had a pretty thorough discussion about the timing of this in my briefing, and I do think, while it is unique, I think going back to December is interesting in terms of binding the commission to a decision that was to backdate. And especially because the 2022 amounts are fairly immaterial. So initially, I would have been more comfortable with the January 1st deadline, but I can meet you guys at alternative 1.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, in docket 5 AF 108, I move that we approve the deferral request consistent with our discussion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that brings us to agenda item 17, which is docket 9803-CE-100. This is a request from Wisconsin Power and Light to add a 75 megawatt alternating current battery energy storage system to its Wood County solar project. So back in 2021, the commission approved the construction of Wood County solar project for a PV facility with a generating capacity of up to 193 megawatts of direct current and 150 megawatts of alternating current in Wood County. After that, Wisconsin Power and Light sought the authority to acquire, construct, own, and operate a total of 6 different solar PV facilities, including the Wood County solar project. We granted that authorization, and now the applicant is coming back to us, and they are asking us to reopen that approval to add a 75 megawatt alternating current battery storage system at that Wood County facility. So this particular docket looks at the environmental impacts and the siting of that additional battery energy storage facility at Wood County. And so we have seen this a number of times, and I'm just going to say at the outset a couple of things. The site and acquire model that's becoming more common can lend itself to a lot of frustration. Frustration on behalf of the public, frustration on behalf of interveners, and frustration on behalf of me, because I'm the only person I'm allowed to speak for. And it's frustrating because at the end of the day, we at the commission are doing our jobs multiple times. Because we don't have integrated resource planning, and because site and acquire is a legal way of managing a construction activity, there isn't anything statutorily that we can do as we sit here right now. So I felt some of the frustration, and we'll talk about it in our last docket. I felt some frustration come through, and I share that frustration, but we don't have integrated resource planning. And unfortunately, at times it feels as though we are making these decisions in a vacuum. That being said, we are statutorily obligated to go through these applications. And if this site and acquire model continues, and we're going through facilities and we are authorizing the construction of a solar PV facility, and then a year later, we're seeing an application for a battery energy storage system, and then on top of that, we're seeing rate cases, and on top of that, we're seeing everything else, something's got to give. So that's just my way of acknowledging the frustration with the way that some of these projects have been presented to us and the volume of work that it requires as a backdrop to everything else that we do day in and day out, because there are still rate proceedings that have to occur. There are still accounting proceedings that have to occur. There are still fuel cases that have to occur. And I think sometimes it's important to point out to everybody that we regulate more than 5 investor-owned utilities. We actually regulate over 1,000 utilities. And so while I'm probably coming across as really crabby because I am, but it's just a way of acknowledging the frustration that clearly came through some of the interveners' comments. in the last docket that we're going to talk about today. But because they're all tied together, I felt that I needed to address the elephant in the room, as it were. And so I am going to vote to approve the inclusion of the battery energy storage system. But I would be remiss if I didn't point out that this type of process and this type of managing construction activities is untenable, in my opinion. And so I would, in a very friendly manner, ask future applicants that if you know you're going to be including a battery energy storage system at a facility, perhaps that could be done on the front end. And I get that this is evolving, right? And it's an iterative process, and we know more now about battery storage facilities than we did even 2 years ago, because it is evolving. And perhaps there's another technology that's coming down the road. But we have to acknowledge that we don't have integrated resource planning, and we have to acknowledge that we have a statutory obligation that this body takes very seriously, and it requires a thorough examination of all of these dockets. And so if there's an inkling that battery storage is going to be a part of an applicant's generation portfolio, I would urge them to include that request when they come to us at the outset. So I will pause there. I don't know if anybody has any comments.
I have some comments when we get to the CE docket.
To the 6, okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm sorry, not the
I agree
CE,
with
but the
everything you
last
said.
one.
okay. All right, okay. So, related to the battery energy storage system, in this particular case, Wood County, the environmental impacts were studied and were evaluated in supplemental EA. That supplemental EA found that the addition of the facilities would be likely. However, it didn't identify any potential environmental effects that could be considered significant. And that is, of course, assuming that we take into account some of the proposed conditions. So the first request in front of us is the request to add that nameplate capacity of 75 megawatts. And I was okay with adding the 75 megawatts in this particular case. So I'm at alternative 1 on page 13. Commissioner Huebner.
I'm at the same spot. I think the supplemental interconnection process that MISO has created, I think has been a real value add to, obviously, Wisconsin utilities. We've seen it. It's a way to really maximize the amount of power that you're pushing through the infrastructure that you have. And I think that that kind of tenet is important, not just for these generation sites, but as a concept for the whole utility, right? Is how do we maximize the use of the infrastructure that we have? And that's what, the first two that we see, just from an electrical standpoint, adding these batteries enables that and enables energy and capacity to be used throughout the year, and not just when the sun is shining. So I think it makes sense. And as you said, environmentally, there were no additional impacts identified. The one special concern butterfly had been identified in the solar proceeding underlying it. So there was really no change on that front. So I'm at alternative 1.
Okay. Commissioner Strand.
I'm at alternative 1 also. Thank you.
So then, the next decision relates to conditions that should be included. And for this one, I was going to accept all but condition 10. So in their comments to us, the applicant pointed out that in the underlying Wood County solar project, there were no livestock operations identified within a half mile of the project. So in my mind, that makes condition 10 not applicable. So I would actually strike condition 10. And then, as it relates to 15, I think this is the first time we've seen this, at least the first time I could recall, the applicant's proposed modification. And that was, they sought clarification around the words, "any safety incidents." And they used as an example, minor scrapes occurring. And clearly, that's not what we're getting at. We are getting at incidents that would trigger reporting. We don't need to know of every hangnail that occurs during the course of construction, or operation for that matter. So I was actually okay with accepting the applicant's modification to condition number 15. And so with those modifications, I was at alternative 2. I would accept then all the others as written. Commissioner Huebner?
Great, yes, I was in agreement with you on accepting all of them and excluding number 10 because of the lack of agricultural confined animal operations within a half mile, as we had found in the solar case. I was okay leaving 15 as is, and I know there was some uncertainty maybe from the applicant around what that is, but I've had my thought process, especially around the batteries with the new technology, is that we'd rather report more and know more, given how new they are and how there have been some incidents, primarily the 2 in Arizona. So my thinking was to leave it as is. I can join you, but my inclination is to leave it broader, so.
Okay. Commissioner Strand?
Commissioner Siemens, yeah.
So I'm also at alternative 2, and I'm fine with striking 10. So on 15, if we accept the modification, would it be safety incidents that trigger reporting? Is that what we're? Okay.
Yes.
Yep, I can support you there. I'm
Okay.
fine with that, thank you, I think that makes sense.
Okay. And then finally, have we complied with WEPA pursuant to Wisconsin statute? I'm at alternative 1. Yes,
I
we
am
have.
as well.
Okay,
E3.
okay, thank you. All right.
Okay, in docket 9803 CE 100, I move that we approve the application for an addition of battery energy storage at Wood County Solar, consistent with our discussion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that brings us to agenda item 18, which is docket 9804-CE-100. This is now seeking permission to install a new battery energy storage system at the Grant County facility. So similar to the last case, we approved the construction of Grant County Solar. After that approval was issued, we then authorized Wisconsin Power and Light to acquire, construct, own, and operate those 6 facilities, including Grant County. And then, similar to the case that we just had, on September 30th of 2022, Wisconsin Power and Light submitted a request to reopen the docket and consider modifying it in order to add a 100 megawatt alternating current battery energy storage system. And so similar to the case that we just went through, I will skip my opening diatribe and I'll go right to the alternatives that are in front of us. And I am comfortable authorizing the construction of up to 100 megawatts of battery energy storage system. And then we can talk about conditions if we get votes to approve that battery system. Commissioner Huebner?
Yep, I too am at alternative 1. There was, again, from the environmental review, again, this docket is mainly the environmental, not the economics. There was no changes identified and some additional stormwater ponds and things that would be needed, but no concerns from the environmental review. So I'm at alternative 1.
Commissioner Strand?
I'm also at alternative 1, thank you.
Okay. Then our next discussion is around the additional order conditions. Similar order conditions And in this particular case, the applicant has proposed modifications to condition 10 and condition 15. I'm going to go out of order. 15 is the safety incidents that we just talked about, and so I would again accept that language to be consistent with what we just decided. And then in this particular case, condition 10 relates to stray voltage testing. And this one is not that it should be waived, but this is a little different. It's a little different nuance, and that is that the utility has already done their pre-construction stray voltage testing. And so they believe that those existing test results provide a reasonable baseline, and they are requesting that now we only require the stray voltage testing after the project is energized. So I thought that this was an okay thing, and I thought that it was reasonable. I was happy to see that they had done their pre-construction stray voltage testing. And I think this is a unique situation, and again, if things were done in concert, we would eliminate these types of incongruencies. But I was fine with their proposed condition, which they are seeking that we revise this order condition to require stray voltage testing only after the project is energized, and that the condition be modified to eliminate the reference to a particular study area, and instead allow Wisconsin Power and Light to work with commission staff on an appropriate area for testing. And I was okay with that. So I would accept their proposed modifications to conditions 10 and 15. Commissioner Huebner?
Yep, I'm at the same spot. I would accept 1 through 9, same spot that I was on the last one. 1 through 9, I would accept 11 through 19, and I would modify number 10. Consistent with your discussion, I was in the same spot. They've already done the pre-construction, and that's a baseline, that's good. And then I'm fine with them working with staff on the area. And on number 15, I would keep it as is and keep it broader.
Okay. Commissioner Strand?
I'm in agreement on the changes to 10. I think in a perfect world, we would like all of these things to be consistent among CPCNs, but it's just not what's in front of us right now. It's not reality, especially given, like you said, the kind of disjointed process and reopeners. And then for 15, I'm comfortable with the modifications that you proposed, that the applicant offered.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. And I just want to check there's a weird parenthetical in there.
Or is it just?
sorry about that. The condition, both in this one and the other one, as it relates to the reporting on the safety incidents, has a parenthetical pursuant to a schedule the commission finds appropriate. And so we need a time period. So sorry, it took us a minute. We have historically sent 60 days.
Okay.
If that's acceptable for the schedule for inclusion in this condition.
That's okay with me.
Same.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. No, it's
Do we
good.
need to do
do
anything
it
with the
now.
No,
last?
we'll just
order?
clean it up
Okay.
in the order.
And then, Chair, I think we need to do the
Oh,
environmental
WEPA.
review.
Did we? Yes, thank you, Commissioner Hebner. Our final decision point is whether or not we complied with WEPA. And similar to the last case, I'm at alternative one. Yes, we did comply with WEPA.
Yep, the staff completed the supplemental EA, so I'm at alternative one.
I am as well. Thank you.
Okay.
In docket 9804 CE 100, I move we approve the addition of up to 100 megawatts of battery energy storage for Grant County Solar, consistent with our discussion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so now we move to our final item on today's agenda, which is Agenda Item 19, docket 6680-CE-182. This is the actual application for approval of the two battery energy storage systems. So now the applicant is looking for the actual CPCNs associated with those sites. So while the previous two decisions we just finished focused on environmental and siting only, now we get to the part where we consider need, costs, and if there are commensurate system benefits of adding these battery energy storage system projects to the Wood County and Grant County solar sites. So as presented in their application, the transaction would cost approximately $369.2 million. That's about $202 million for Grant County and $151.5 million for Wood County. Then there would be AFUDC of $9 million for Grant County and $6.7 for Wood County. The applicant has capacity needs due to the sale of 125 megawatts of their West Riverside plant. It's my understanding that there is the second option that's coming on the potential sale of 125 megawatts related to that facility. The applicant has revised their clean energy blueprint. They hired a consultant, Charles River Associates, to simulate the possible futures in terms of capacity needs, generation modeling. And they use the Aurora modeling software program, as has been the case for us in the past. While we don't have that in-house, we do propose modifications and different runs to the Aurora program, and the applicant was capable and did help us run those different scenarios. So there have been some changes in the market, right? So the clean energy blueprint came out a number of years ago, and in the intervening years, MISO has shifted to the subannual resource adequacy construct. We've talked about that in prior cases. They're using the seasonal capacity accreditation model. And because of some of the changes, the applicant has gone and they've looked at their clean energy blueprint and they have made changes and tweaks along the way. The bottom line is that the software the modeling does demonstrate that the need is there for the applicant. And it also demonstrates that adding battery energy storage is one of the least cost. If you can force it and you can kind of tweak it and play with it to get it to pick, I believe it was wind that came out on top. But given the capacity needs and the timeline, constructing And getting that much wind into operation in the timeline that it's needed just isn't feasible. So, I'm going to pause, and I know, Commissioner Hebner, you said that you had a couple of thoughts. So before we get into the details of this docket, I'm going to see if my colleagues have any general comments.
Yeah,
Commissioner
thank you
Hebner.
very much. I think, yeah, looking at the modeling, I have continued to be impressed with the Aurora modeling that this applicant has done, in particular because they look at 5 different kind of visions of the future, or 5 different ways the next 20 to 30 years could play out. It's not dependent on sort of status quo. The economy's good, load growth is X, load growth is Y. You know, they're looking at policy changes, they're looking at pricing changes, they're looking at more energy efficiency, more electric vehicles. So they're kind of bounding that analysis, and I think that that's a really good way to be doing futures-based analyses. As you said, Chair, you know, this is on page 11 of the memo, and this is public. The lowest cost option was wind, but it was 1,000 megawatts of wind, which by my tracker is actually about as much wind as we have in the state of Wisconsin now. So that would be a significant change, and I think I mean, I agree with the applicant that it's really not feasible to have that in place. Not that we wouldn't someday have more wind, but that with the capacity need in 2025 or 2026, you know, it's not reasonable to assume that you could do that, especially because all of those need to go through the MISO interconnection queue process, which is a multi-year process in itself. So that leaves battery storage being the least cost in their analysis. The 2 areas I wanted to mention, one was the comment on page 12 of this memo. The applicant avers that energy efficiency may reduce loads but does not directly receive MISO capacity accreditation. And I would just continue to point out that, you know, applicants like this, you are seeking capacity and capacity at accreditation to meet the load that you have. Energy efficiency removes the load. It removes the need to serve the load. So it doesn't need accreditation. It's not there. Now, obviously, that depends when you are doing your energy efficiency, but you know, we've asked Focus to continue to look at peak times and winter times. So I think that we are evolving as things like the MISO accreditation and seasonal approach evolves too. So I'm just pointing that out. There's still more opportunity for energy efficiency. Mm-hmm. The other big thing I guess I would mention before we get into details, as you said, was the comments of both Cub and WIG, concerned about the overall costs. And I think that one of the takeaways I had from their comments was the concern about the new and the old still being in rates. And I just wanted to remind the public and those applicants that in the last time we took up an electric rate case for Alliant, which I printed out, if people want to look up, IRF number 427-760, that's our final order, and order point 8 was, the applicant shall include in their next rate case filing an analysis of alternatives regarding the recovery of the remaining useful life of Edgewater Unit 5 and any other generating units proposed to be decommissioned prior to the end of the facility's useful life. So that question is going to be before us, presumably in this next rate case. So I think it's a great point that they're making, and it's an issue that we're going to have to wrestle with. And we've teed up exactly that in the last time we took up a rate case with this applicant. So those were my overarching comments.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Strand?
I don't have any comments at this time. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we really only have one decision point
Yep.
in front of us. There's no decision matrix. This is just, you know, there are proposed conditions offered. Cub raised a couple of proposed conditions, and I also want to hit on the comments that WIG submitted, and they identified, they pointed out back in the 90s, the commission required competitive bidding and an RFP process for construction activities. And I think that that's a really good idea. And as I sit here and I go through construction application after construction application, their comment made me sort of perk up and wonder, why did we stop having competitive bidding or RFPs? And Commissioner Huebner, you're exactly right. For this particular applicant, we were very specific as it relates to the early retirement of their facilities, that a proposal has to be brought to us. And CUB points out that while they don't object to these two proposed projects, they have concerns regarding the cumulative customer rate impact of not only the two facilities that we're talking about today, but the nearly $2 billion in investment that's either already been approved by us or is pending. That's what's in front of us, or pending. We don't know what's coming down the road. And so we have acknowledged that this transition is taking place. We continue to acknowledge that the transition will continue to occur, but it comes with a cost. And I've said it before, I don't believe in allowing utility companies to be given a blank check. Because at the end of the day, it is all of us sitting here in this room and listening who end up paying the bill. And so we have got to find a way to minimize customer impacts. We have to. We're changing the way that electricity is generated, delivered, consumed, and in my mind, that means we also have to look at alternative ways of how to pay for this, because it's unsustainable, and without a planning tool like an IRP, we are required to take these up case by case. But just because we take them up case by case doesn't mean that we don't all take into account the cumulative impact that these projects have on customers. It's customers. And that is the interest that we have to continually balance, is the interest between ensuring reliability and accepting things like the seasonal construct coming out of MISO, and we have to ensure that the lights stay on, and we will continue to keep a careful watch over what's happening in the planning resource auction, and as it relates to the capacity needs for our state. Yes, that is of utmost importance, but it cannot be done on the backs of customers. We've got to come up with a better way. So I would be willing to entertain looking at going out for RFPs or competitive bidding. Unfortunately, we can't do that in this case because the record wasn't developed, and it came as a part of WIG's comments that were filed at the end of the case. But I do take those comments to heart, and I would be interested in and willing to look at that. And maybe that is a tool that we can use in an effort to mitigate rate impacts. CUB also had a suggestion about requiring reporting on tax impacts, because through the BIL and the IRA, there are going to be a number of tax credits and incentives that flow. And they're flowing all over the place, right? They're flowing to developers, to utilities, to states, to large energy users. And I appreciate that comment, but I would say we were one step ahead of CUB in that we opened up the docket to keep all of that information in one place. And certainly, we also included that docket, I believe, in the last rate order we issued in 2022, was to have maybe it wasn't Power and Light, but one of the utilities.
Yeah.
So while I think that Cub's suggestion in including that as a condition in this docket is a valid suggestion, I think we've already taken care of it by opening the generic docket to look at all incentives and funding that utilities go after and requiring it in a rate case. So then the second thing that came up was the applicant requested a change to the accounting entries. They requested that rather than 30 days, they be given 60 days, and I don't have a problem making that change. They also requested a change to condition 3, where they requested that we use the $353.5 million, excluding AFUDC. I think I'm getting that right. Yeah, okay. And I would keep it as is. So I think for consistency's sake and for the way that we track costs, the way that condition 3 is worded falls in line with the way that we historically account for the costs. And I would keep it as is. So I would not make any modification to that. Other than that, I was okay with accepting the remaining conditions, which puts me for the docket at alternative 2. Commissioner Huebner.
Thank you. I landed at alternative 2 as well. Just make a few additional comments based on your insights, and I appreciate everything you said. I too am open to the idea of more competitive bidding in RFPs. I know some of our utilities do that, and others have. It's been a lot of timing issues with, if you need the generation, there's not always a lot available that has actually through the MISO queue or could be in time for actual completion. So I think that we've been able to show the costs of the solar, for example, has been quite competitive and maybe lower than what we've seen in other states when our staff has looked at that. But I'm not opposed to that at all. On the costs of these particular projects, some of the factors that weigh into my approval include overall, as you said, I mean, and WIG points out, the volume of capital is large. The analysis that's done has shown that pays off over time, that we have this upfront investment that does have an impact on rates. Over time, those assets depreciate, and that does reduce in the amount of rates, and then as soon as the assets are actually built, we'll start to see that fuel savings. And we've seen last couple years fuel, cost overruns. Hopefully we'll start to see those come down as we are less reliant on those fuels. The two other pieces of this, and it'll play in the Edgewater BEST docket too, but to the extent, well, number one is the tax credits. So that's new and available, 30% tax credit on one of these projects, 40% on the second one. And those are substantial, that will come off, the top and reduce costs to customers. And the other side is that this is, as the memo kind of describes, I mean, this is backfilling Riverside. Well, WPL is getting dollars from Riverside, the sale of Riverside. So to the extent, some of that money is essentially going to go to pay for this capacity. So when you add that all together, it's an estimated 1% to 3% rate impact. And maybe the value of the batteries and ability to energy arbitrage, maybe we can hopefully see additional value once these are in service. So those were my other thoughts, kind of more generally. Mm-hmm. And as far as the specifics, I was at alternative 2. I would join you on both of your conditions. So I would be at 60 days. I'm fine with that, but I would keep the condition 3 as it was written. And then you didn't want to adopt anything on the Cubs question about tax credits here, but we will track that in the other docket.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
All right, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks. Commissioner Strand?
I'm also at alternative 2 and support the 60-day change in keeping condition 3 the same. The only other thing I'll add is, first, I appreciate both of your comments on this, and as someone who's very familiar with the competitive bidding process, I absolutely support the exploration of that going forward.
Right. I was thinking of you and your background and that, I was wondering, does it seem odd to you?
Shocking that we do not do that.
Yeah.
And that we can cite and acquire, but
Right.
we already covered that.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's interesting.
The only other comment, I just saw a note that I left myself was the utilities in Wisconsin really don't look at bilateral contracts often, and we don't see those really as options. The thing that came to mind in this particular docket was, if wind is better over the long run, is there some sort of short-term option? Again, that was not explored in the record. We had multiple interveners. It wasn't presented. So that's, to the extent that those issues really can be fleshed out in the record, as opposed to comments, at the end, that could help us.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
So with that, I stay where I said I was before and ready for a motion. In docket 6680 CE 182, I move that we approve the application of Wisconsin Power and Light for a certificate of authority to acquire these 2 battery systems consistent with our discussion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that concludes our official business for today. Our next open meeting is scheduled for Thursday, June 29th, 2023 at 10:30 a.m.
Move we stand adjourned till Thursday, June 29th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.